The sky turned dark over Outpost 7 as the massive ship blocked out the sun. It wasn't like the human ships that visited the colony every few months. This one was 3 times bigger, with a shape that reminded people of the ancient sea monsters from Earth's old maps. "What is that?" asked Governor Doug Wilson, his voice shaking as he stared at the main screen in the command center. Lieutenant Melissa Parker checked her readings again, hoping she was wrong. "Sir, it matches the description of a Draconian warship." The room went silent. Everyone had heard stories about the Draconians. They were the most feared species in this part of space, giant reptiles with scales, wings, and technology far beyond what humans had. Most races stayed far away from Draconian territory. Until today, no human had ever seen one up close. "Sound the alarm," Wilson ordered. "Get everyone to the shelters." The colony sirens began to wail. Outside, people dropped what they were doing and ran toward the underground bunkers. Parents grabbed children, shopkeepers locked up, and farmers abandoned their fields. Within minutes, the streets were almost empty. Almost. 8-year-old Danny Ortega had been playing in the community garden when the sirens started. His mom, Sophie, worked in the medical center on the other side of the colony. When the huge shadow fell over the garden, Danny looked up instead of running. "Wow," he whispered, watching as the ship slowly descended toward the colony's central plaza. Back in the command center, Communications Officer Tyler Brooks turned from his station with wide eyes. "Sir, they're sending us a message." "Put it on screen," Wilson said, straightening his uniform jacket. The main screen flickered, and everyone gasped. The face that appeared was like nothing they had seen before. It had amber eyes with slits for pupils, green-blue scales that seemed to shine like metal, and a long snout with rows of sharp teeth. When it spoke, its deep voice made the speakers vibrate. "Human colony." The creature said in surprisingly good English, "I am Commander Vex of the Draconian Exploration Fleet. Your settlement has been selected for evaluation. Prepare to receive our emissary." Wilson looked at Parker. "What does that mean, evaluation?" Parker shook her head. "From what I've heard, they evaluate whether new species are threats or potential allies. Some races don't pass their test. And what happens to those races?" Wilson asked. Parker just looked at him. She didn't need to answer. Wilson took a deep breath and pressed the communication button. "This is Governor Doug Wilson of Outpost 7. We welcome your emissary and assure you we are a peaceful colony." The Draconian commander's eyes narrowed. "We will determine that for ourselves. Clear your central plaza for landing." The screen went dark. Security Chief Miller. Wilson called across the room. "Get your team to the plaza. Non-threatening posture, but be ready for anything." Andy Miller nodded grimly. "Yes, sir." "What about the civilians?" "Keep them in the shelters," Wilson ordered. "I want as few people as possible out there." As the command team hurried toward the plaza, Danny Ortega watched from behind a row of bushes as the massive ship lowered itself to the ground. Unlike the other colonists, he hadn't run to the shelters. Something about the ship made him curious instead of scared. The ship settled onto the plaza with a deep hum that Danny could feel in his chest. Steam hissed from vents along its sides as it cooled down. A section of the hull began to move, sliding open to form a wide ramp. Danny crept closer, staying hidden behind planters and benches. He could see Governor Wilson and about 10 other adults standing at the edge of the plaza. They all wore their best uniforms and looked very nervous. "Remember," he heard Wilson say to the others, "no sudden movements. We need to appear friendly but respectful." Danny wondered what they were waiting for. Then he saw it. A shape appeared in the doorway of the ship. At first, Danny thought it was some kind of machine. It was too big to be a person. But as it moved down the ramp into the sunlight, he realized what he was seeing. It was a dragon. Not like the cartoon dragons in his storybooks. This was real. It stood on two powerful back legs, with smaller arms folded against its chest. Its body was covered in scales that shifted colors as it moved, from deep green to blue to purple. Wings were folded tightly against its back, and its long tail swayed slightly as it walked. Around its neck was a metal collar with blinking lights. Danny's mouth fell open. It was the most amazing thing he had ever seen. The dragon stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked at the humans. It was at least 12 feet tall, towering over even the tallest person there. When it opened its mouth, Danny expected fire, but instead it spoke. "I am Emissary Thorn," it said, its voice deep and rumbling. The collar round its neck glowed as it spoke. "I have come to determine if humans are worthy of continued existence." Governor Wilson stepped forward, his hands visibly shaking. "Welcome to Outpost 7, Emissary. We are honored by your visit." The dragon's eyes narrowed. Many species say such things while planning violence. Words mean little. Actions reveal truth. "We assure you, we have no hostile intentions," Wilson said. "Humans are explorers and settlers, not conquerors." The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. "All species claim peace when faced with superior power. Your kind has spread to 17 worlds in just 1 century. Such rapid expansion concerns us," Lieutenant Parker spoke up. "We expand because we're curious, not because we want to take over." The dragon turned its gaze to her, and she fell silent. "We will observe your colony for 3 days," the dragon announced. "During this time, we will learn your true nature. If we find you worthy, trade routes may open. If not," it didn't finish the sentence. Danny watched all this from his hiding spot, fascinated. Unlike the adults, he wasn't scared of the dragon. It reminded him of the lizards he sometimes caught near the colony's edge, just much, much bigger. As the adults continued talking with the dragon, Danny noticed something. The dragon kept shifting its weight from one foot to the other. Its tail twitched in a way that seemed uncomfortable, and every few minutes, it would stretch its neck as if trying to relieve tension. Danny recognized those signs. His pet lizard did the same things when it had been in its carrier too long. The dragon was uncomfortable after its long journey. Without thinking about it, Danny stepped out from his hiding place. He walked past the shocked security team, past Governor Wilson, who reached out to stop him but missed, and straight up to the massive dragon. Everyone froze. The dragon's eyes locked onto the small human child approaching it. Its muscles tensed and a low rumble started in its chest. "Danny!" Someone shouted from behind, but Danny kept walking. He stopped right in front of the dragon and looked up at its towering form. The dragon lowered its head, bringing its massive face down to Danny's level. Its nostrils flared as it sniffed him. "Hi," Danny said simply. "My name's Danny. You look tired from your trip. Do your wings hurt from being folded up so long?" The dragon's eyes widened in surprise. The dragon stared at Danny with golden eyes bigger than dinner plates. Everyone in the plaza held their breath. Security Chief Andy Miller slowly reached for his weapon, but Lieutenant Parker grabbed his arm and shook her head. "Child," the dragon said, its voice softer now but still deep enough to make Danny's chest vibrate. "You are not afraid?" Danny shrugged. "You're big, but you don't look mean. You look tired." The dragon tilted its massive head. The scales around its neck shifted from green to a soft blue color. "Most beings run from my kind. Even adult warriors of other species tremble. Yet you approach without fear. My mom says I don't have enough sense to be scared of things I should be." Danny admitted with a smile. "Are you really a dragon? We have stories about dragons on Earth, but everyone said they weren't real." Governor Wilson finally found his voice. "Danny, come back here right now." The dragon raised one clawed hand. "The child will not be harmed. His approach is unexpected." Danny pointed at the dragon's wings, which were still folded tightly against its back. "Can you fly with those?" "They look cramped." The dragon seemed to consider this, then slowly extended one wing. The colonists gasped as it stretched out, nearly 30 feet of thin, strong membrane supported by bony fingers. The wing caught the sunlight, showing patterns of darker scales that ran through it like veins. "Yes, small human, I can fly, but not in your thin atmosphere without assistance from our technology." Danny nodded as if this made perfect sense. "My lizard gets stiff if he sits too long in one spot. Do you want to stretch? You keep shifting your weight like your feet hurt." For a moment, the dragon was silent. Then a rumbling sound came from its chest. It took the humans a few seconds to realize the dragon was laughing. In 300 years of first contact missions, no being has ever asked about my comfort. The dragon lowered itself to sit on the ground, its tail curling around its body. Now it was only about 8 feet tall, still towering over Danny, but less intimidating. "You are correct. The journey was long, and this form is not designed for extended periods in small spaces. Governor Wilson cautiously stepped forward. "Emissary, please forgive the child's intrusion. He doesn't understand protocol. Perhaps that is why his approach is valuable," the dragon replied. "He sees clearly, without the fog of fear or politics." It turned back to Danny. "What is your designation, small human?" "I'm Danny Ortega. I'm 8. He held up 8 fingers to show his age. "I am Emissary Thorn of the 4th Clutch." The dragon said, "In your years, I am 73. Danny's eyes widened. "Wow, that's old. My grandpa is 62, and he says that's ancient." Another rumble of laughter came from the dragon. "For my kind, I am considered young. That is why I was chosen for this mission. The elders believed my flexibility of mind might be useful." While they talked, more draconians had emerged from the ship. They were smaller than Thorn, but still impressive, each standing about 9 feet tall. They carried devices that beeped and flashed as they scanned the area. "Those are my survey team," Thorn explained to Danny. "They will study your colony while I speak with your leaders." Danny nodded seriously. "Are you hungry? When people visit us, my mom always offers them food and drinks." Governor Wilson looked horrified at the question, but Thorn seemed amused. "Our nutritional needs are different from yours, but the gesture is appreciated. It has been some time since my last meal." Danny turned to the governor. "Mr. Wilson, the dragon is hungry. We should get food." Wilson looked from the boy to the massive reptilian creature, clearly at a loss. I'm not sure what draconians eat." "Protein," Thorn said simply, "preferably from large herbivores." Lieutenant Parker whispered something to one of the security officers, who nodded and jogged away toward the colony's storage facilities. "We have synthetic protein and some real meat in cold storage," Wilson said. "We keep cattle for special occasions." Thorn's eyes narrowed slightly. "You raise animals for consumption?" "Yes," Wilson said nervously. "Is that a problem?" "No," Thorn replied. "It is a point of similarity. My kind also raises food animals. Some species we have encountered consider this practice barbaric." Danny was still looking up at the dragon with open curiosity. "Can I touch your scales?" They looked shiny. Before any of the adults could stop him, Danny reached out his small hand toward the dragon's forearm. Everyone tensed, but Thorn simply extended its arm, allowing the boy to place his palm against the scales. "They're smooth," Danny said with delight, "and warm. I thought you'd be cold like my lizard. We regulate our body temperature internally." Thorn explained, "Unlike your Earth reptiles, we do not need external heat sources." As Danny continued to examine the dragon's scales with fascination, Sophie Ortega finally pushed through the security line, her face pale with fear. "Danny," she cried, rushing forward. Thorn's head snapped up, eyes locking onto the running woman. The dragon's posture changed instantly, muscles tensing as if ready to strike. "Mom," Danny called happily, unaware of the danger. "Look, it's a real dragon." Sophie froze, suddenly aware of how close her son was to the massive creature. "Danny," she said in a shaky voice, "please come here. This is your offspring?" Thorn asked, looking between Danny and Sophie. "Yes," Sophie whispered. "He's my son." Thorn studied her for a moment, then relaxed slightly. "He shows remarkable courage, or perhaps remarkable lack of self-preservation instinct." "Both," Sophie admitted, managing a weak smile. "He's always been fearless." Danny was still patting the dragon's scales. "Mom, can Thorn come see my lizard? I bet they'd like each other." Sophie looked helplessly at Governor Wilson, who seemed equally lost for words. "Perhaps later," Thorn said to Danny. "First, I must speak with your leaders about important matters." "Boring grown-up stuff?" Danny asked. Thorn's mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "Yes, boring grown-up stuff about trade, boundaries, and whether our species will be friends or enemies." "We should be friends," Danny said firmly. "Fighting is stupid." "Many would agree with you," Thorn said. "Yet fear often leads to conflict before understanding can take root." The security officer returned with a large container. "We have beef, sir. About 50 pounds of it." Thorn's nostrils flared as the container was opened. "This will suffice. My team will require sustenance as well." As the Draconians were led to a hastily arranged eating area, Danny refused to leave Thorn's side. To everyone's surprise, the dragon seemed to accept the child's presence, even explaining things to him as they walked. "Your colony is smaller than I expected," Thorn commented to Wilson as they moved toward the administration building. "We're still growing," Wilson explained. "Outpost 7 is only 15 years old, yet you have established agriculture, education systems, and basic industry," Thorn noted. "Impressive growth rate." Danny tugged on one of Thorn's claws. "Do you have kids where you come from?" "We have hatchlings," Thorn replied. "They are raised in communal clutches until they reach maturity." "Do they play games?" Danny asked. "They train and learn," Thorn said. "But yes, they also engage in recreational activities that you might call games." Sophie watched this exchange with amazement. Her son was chatting with an alien dragon as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And somehow, the fearsome creature was responding with patience. As they reached the administration building, Thorn turned to Danny. "Now I must speak with your leaders alone." "Young human," Danny looked disappointed. "Will I see you again before you leave?" Thorn considered this. "I will be here for 3 days. Perhaps you could show me these lizards you keep comparing me to." Danny's face lit up. "Really? That would be awesome." "Danny," Sophie said gently, "the emissary is very busy. I find the child's perspective valuable." Thorn said, surprising everyone again. "In my experience, the young often see truth that adults have learned to ignore." As Sophie led Danny away, the boy turned and waved. "Bye, Thorn. See you tomorrow." The dragon raised a clawed hand in what appeared to be a wave back. Governor Wilson stared in disbelief. "Emissary, I must apologize again for—" "No apology is needed," Thorn interrupted. "The child has done more for human-Draconian relations in 10 minutes than your diplomats could have achieved in years." "What do you mean?" Lieutenant Parker asked. Thorn's golden eyes seemed to glow in the fading light. He approached without fear or agenda. "He saw me as I am, not as a threat or a resource to be managed. Such clarity is rare and valuable." The dragon looked in the direction Danny had gone. "Perhaps there is hope for our species after all." The next morning, Danny woke up earlier than usual. He jumped out of bed and ran to his mother's room. "Mom, wake up. We need to go see Thorn." Sophie groaned and looked at her clock. "Danny, it's 6:30 in the morning. The meeting with the Draconians isn't until 10 o'clock. But I promised to show Thorn my lizard." Danny held up the small terrarium where his pet lizard, Rex, was still sleeping on a warm rock. Sophie sat up and rubbed her eyes. After yesterday's events, she had been called to an emergency meeting with Governor Wilson and the colony's leadership. They had talked for hours about the Draconian visit and what it meant for Outpost 7. "Danny, listen," she said gently. "Emissary Thorn is very important. The governor and other leaders need to talk with him about serious things." Thorn said I could show him Rex. Danny insisted. "He wants to see him." Sophie was about to argue when her comm unit buzzed. She picked it up and was surprised to see Lieutenant Parker's face on the screen. "Good morning." "Sophie," Parker said. "Is Danny awake?" "Yes, he's right here," Sophie replied, confused. "The Draconian emissary has been asking for him. Apparently, they start their days very early." And Thorn mentioned something about a promised meeting with Danny and a lizard. Sophie looked at her son in disbelief. Danny grinned. "See? Thorn remembers." An hour later, Sophie and Danny stood outside the large temporary structure that had been set up near the Draconian ship. Several security officers nodded at them as they approached. "Morning, Danny," said Officer Mike Thompson with a smile. "Your dragon friend is waiting inside." Danny beamed. Rex is excited to meet him too. He held up the terrarium where his small green lizard was now awake and looking around. Inside the structure, Thorn sat on a specially built platform that could support his weight. 2 smaller Draconians stood nearby, holding scanning devices. Governor Wilson and Chief Miller were also present, looking tired but alert. When Thorn saw Danny, the scales around his neck shifted to a bright blue color. "Young human," the dragon said. "You have arrived as promised. I brought Rex." Danny held up the terrarium proudly. "He's my lizard." Thorn leaned forward, his massive head coming closer to examine the small container. "Rex the lizard," seeing the enormous dragon face, puffed up his throat pouch and turned a darker shade of green. He is trying to make himself appear larger, Thorn observed. A common defense mechanism. Yeah, he does that when he's scared or trying to look tough. Danny explained. Can I take him out so you can see him better? Sophie looked nervous, but Thorn nodded. I would like to observe this creature more closely. Danny carefully opened the terrarium and lifted Rex out. The small lizard sat calmly on his hand, though his eyes were fixed on Thorn. On our world, Thorn said, we have creatures similar to this, though much larger. Some are the size of your ground vehicles. Really? Danny's eyes widened. That's so cool. Do you keep them as pets too? Not as pets, Thorn replied, but we study them and protect their habitats. They are distant relatives from our evolutionary past. One of the smaller draconians approached and spoke in a series of clicks and rumbles. Thorn responded in the same language, then turned back to Danny. My science officer is curious about your relationship with this creature. Why do you keep it? Danny thought for a moment. Because he's interesting to watch, and I like taking care of him. He knows me now, watch. Danny placed Rex on his shoulder, where the lizard perched comfortably. Still eyeing Thorn with suspicion. You have formed a bond with a species very different from your own, Thorn observed. This is uncommon in our experience with other races. Governor Wilson stepped forward. Humans often keep animals as companions. It's part of our culture. Yet you also raise animals for food, Thorn noted. The contradiction is interesting. We respect all life, Sophie said, speaking up for the first time. But we have different relationships with different animals. Thorn considered this. Perhaps this explains your child's reaction to me. He saw me not as a threat, but as another living being worthy of interest and respect. Danny nodded. You're just a really big lizard with wings. And you can talk, which is even cooler. The adults in the room tensed at Danny's casual description. But Thorn made that rumbling laugh sound again. A simple but not inaccurate assessment. The dragon said, though my species would object to being called lizards. Danny put Rex back in his terrarium. What do you want to see next? I could show you the school, or the farm, or the lake. Sophie put her hand on Danny's shoulder. Danny, I'm sure Emissary Thorn has important meetings today. Actually, Governor Wilson said, checking his tablet. We've scheduled a tour of the colony for the Draconian delegation this morning. Danny could join us if the emissary doesn't object. Thorn's golden eyes fixed on Danny. I would welcome the young human's perspective. He sees things others miss. And so Danny found himself walking beside the massive dragon as they toured Outpost 7. People stopped and stared as the strange group passed by the 12-foot dragon. The smaller Draconian scientists, the colony leadership, and one small boy chatting away as if this were a completely normal dot at the hydroponic farm. Thorn showed great interest in the growing systems. Your methods are efficient, the dragon noted. Though different from ours. How do you grow food? Danny asked. We use symbiotic relationships between plants and beneficial microorganisms. Thorn explained. The plants provide nutrients for the microorganisms, which in turn protect the plants from harmful elements. The farm manager looked surprised. That's similar to some experimental techniques we've been developing at the school. The children had been kept inside as a safety precaution, but when they saw Danny walking with the dragon, many pressed their faces against the windows in amazement. Your young are educated together? Thorn asked, observing the classrooms. Yes, Sophie explained. We believe learning in groups helps children develop social skills along with knowledge. Interesting. Our hatchlings are taught individually by specialized instructors, then brought together for practical application of their knowledge. Danny tugged on one of Thorn's claws. Do dragon kids have recess? Recess. Thorn tilted his head. You know, time to play and run around. Ah, yes, physical activity periods are required. Young Draconians have much energy that must be channeled properly. As they reached the lake at the edge of the colony, Thorn spread his wings slightly, enjoying the open space. The sunlight made his scales shimmer with colors that shifted from green to blue to purple. Your world has abundant water, Thorn observed. This is valuable. Do you like swimming? Danny asked. My species evolved in drier regions, Thorn replied. But we appreciate water. It is rare in many parts of our territory. While the adults discussed water management systems, Danny picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the lake's surface. It bounced for times before sinking. Thorn watched with interest. "What purpose does this activity serve?" "It's just fun," Danny said with a shrug. "Want to try?" The adults looked alarmed at the suggestion, but Thorn carefully picked up a large, flat rock. With surprising gentleness, the dragon flicked it across the water. The stone skipped 7 times before disappearing. "Wow!" Danny exclaimed. "You're really good." "It is a matter of physics," Thorn said, but the scales around his neck had turned a bright, pleased blue color. As they walked back toward the colony center, Danny noticed something strange. People were no longer hiding inside their homes. Some had come out to watch, and a few even waved cautiously. The fear from yesterday was fading. "Your people are becoming less afraid," Thorn noted, also observing the change. "They see you're not going to eat us," Danny said matter-of-factly. Sophie gasped, "Danny," but Thorn made that rumbling laugh again. "A reasonable concern, given our appearance. Many species believe we consume sentient beings, do you?" Danny asked bluntly. "Danny." Sophie and Governor Wilson exclaimed together. "No," Thorn answered seriously. "We have strict laws against harming sentient life forms, though we have been known to use this misconception to our advantage in negotiations." As they reached the central plaza, Thorn turned to Danny. "Young human, I thank you for this educational experience. You have shown me aspects of your colony that might have been hidden in formal meetings." Danny beamed. "Can we hang out again tomorrow?" Thorn looked at Governor Wilson. "I believe hang out means to spend recreational time together." Wilson nodded, looking bemused. "I would like that," Thorn said to Danny. "Perhaps you can teach me more of your human games." As Danny and Sophie walked home later, Sophie couldn't help but shake her head in wonder. "Danny, do you realize what you've done? You've made friends with one of the most powerful and feared beings in this part of space." Danny shrugged. "Thorn's not scary once you get to know him. He's just different." Sophie hugged her son close. "Sometimes I think you're the smartest person in this whole colony." On the third and final day of the Draconian visit, tension filled the air at Outpost 7. Everyone knew that today Emissary Thorn would announce his decision about humanity's fate. If the Draconians deemed humans worthy, it could mean new trade routes, technology exchanges, and protection from other threats in this sector of space. If not, no one wanted to think about that option. Governor Wilson paced in his office, checking the time every few minutes. "The meeting is at noon. Everything must be perfect," Lieutenant Parker nodded. "Security is in place, but keeping a low profile as requested. The main hall is prepared for the ceremony." "And Danny?" Wilson asked. "Sophie is bringing him." Thorn specifically asked for the boy to be present. Wilson shook his head in amazement. "Who would have thought our fate might rest on an 8-year-old? Who doesn't know enough to be scared of a dragon?" At the Ortega home, Sophie was trying to get Danny to wear his best clothes. "But these are itchy," Danny complained, pulling at the collar of his dress shirt. "Danny, this is very important," Sophie explained patiently. "The whole colony, maybe even all humans everywhere, need this meeting to go well." Danny frowned. "Thorn already likes us. He told me so yesterday when we were playing catch." Sophie still couldn't believe that her son had spent an hour teaching a 12-foot dragon how to throw and catch a ball. Even more surprising was that Thorn had seemed to enjoy it. "It's not just about whether he likes us," Sophie said. "It's about official relations between our species. It's complicated grown-up stuff." "Grown-up stuff is always complicated," Danny muttered. But he let his mom fix his collar. At the colony's main hall, hundreds of people gathered outside, hoping to hear the announcement. Inside, the colony leadership sat nervously at a long table. Across from them were empty seats built to Draconian specifications. At exactly noon, the doors opened. Thorn entered first, his massive form making the room seem suddenly smaller. Behind him came 4 other Draconians, each carrying devices that blinked with colored lights. Governor Wilson stood. "Emissary Thorn, we welcome you and your delegation to this final meeting." Thorn nodded his great head. "We appreciate your hospitality." The dragon's eyes scanned the room. "The young human is not present." As if on cue, the side door opened and Sophie hurried in with Danny. "Sorry we're late." she whispered. Danny broke free from his mother's hand and ran straight to Thorn. "Hi, I brought you something." The colony leaders looked horrified as Danny pulled a small package from his pocket and held it up to the dragon. Thorn carefully took it in his massive clawed hand. "A gift?" the dragon asked, sounding surprised. "It's a friendship bracelet," Danny explained. "I made it in school yesterday. It's really big because, well, you're really big." Thorn carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a woven band of colorful threads. It was indeed large. Clearly, Danny had used a lot of material to make it big enough for a dragon's wrist. "This is unexpected," Thorn said, examining the bracelet. "What is its purpose?" "It shows we're friends," Danny said simply. "You wear it like this." He pointed to his own wrist, where a similar but much smaller bracelet was tied. The room was silent as Thorn studied the simple gift. Then, to everyone's amazement, the dragon extended one forearm and carefully tied the bracelet around his wrist. The colorful threads looked strange against his shimmering scales. "I accept this symbol of friendship," Thorn said formally. Then he turned to the waiting officials. "Now we must proceed with the official evaluation." Danny went to sit with his mother as Thorn took his place at the table. The dragon's expression became serious. "For 3 days, we have observed your colony," Thorn began. "We have analyzed your technology, your social structures, your resource management, and your potential for both peaceful cooperation and possible threat." Governor Wilson nodded stiffly. "We hope you found us to be good neighbors. Your technology is primitive compared to ours," Thorn stated bluntly. "Your weapons pose no threat to draconian interests. Your resource consumption is inefficient. Your social hierarchies are confusing and sometimes counterproductive." The humans at the table looked increasingly worried as Thorn listed these observations. This didn't sound like the start of a positive evaluation. However, Thorn continued. "We have also observed qualities that are rare among spacefaring species. Your adaptability is remarkable. Your creativity in solving problems with limited resources shows promise. Your willingness to learn from others suggests potential for growth." The dragon raised his arm, showing the friendship bracelet. "And most importantly, you have demonstrated an unusual capacity for forming bonds across species barriers. This is valuable." Danny grinned from his seat beside Sophie. "Therefore," Thorn announced, "the Draconian Evaluation Committee has decided that humanity will be classified as a Category 3 species, potential ally with developmental support." Governor Wilson looked confused. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Thorn explained, "that we see potential in your species. We will establish a permanent diplomatic presence here. We will open limited trade routes. We will share some technologies that will help your development, particularly in areas of sustainable resource management and medical science." The humans at the table looked at each other in amazement. This was far better than they had hoped for. "In return," Thorn continued, "we ask for access to study your cultural development and permission to establish a small research outpost on your moon." "That seems more than fair," Wilson said quickly. "We accept these terms with gratitude." Thorn nodded. "The formal treaty will be prepared by our diplomatic team." The dragon then turned to look directly at Danny. "There is one more condition." The room went silent again. "We request that young Danny Ortega be appointed as a special cultural liaison between our species." Sophie gasped. "But he's just a child." "Precisely," Thorn said. "His perspective is valuable because it is unclouded by adult preconceptions. He will, of course, have adult advisors and will only serve in this capacity for limited periods appropriate to his age and education." Danny jumped up from his seat. "Does that mean I get to visit your planet?" Thorn's scales shifted to that now familiar pleased blue color. "Eventually, yes, when appropriate safety measures can be arranged." "Cool," Danny exclaimed. "Do you have other dragons I can meet? And those big lizards you told me about?" Governor Wilson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the details of this arrangement privately, emissary." "Of course," Thorn agreed. "But the principle is non-negotiable. The child has demonstrated unique abilities as a bridge between our species." Later that evening, as news of the successful treaty spread through the colony, Sophie sat with Danny on their front porch. People kept walking by, waving and smiling at them. Some even stopped to thank Danny, which he found confusing. "Mom, why is everyone making such a big deal?" he asked. "All I did was talk to Thorn." Sophie put her arm around her son. "Danny, sometimes the simplest actions are the most important. Everyone else saw a scary dragon. You saw someone who might be a friend. Because he is a friend," Danny said firmly. "He even wears my bracelet." Sophie smiled. "You know, there's an old story from Earth about a dragon that everyone feared, until one brave person showed kindness to it instead. Like me and Thorn?" "Yes, exactly like that. But in the old stories, it was usually a knight or a princess. I don't think anyone expected the hero to be an 8-year-old boy with a pet lizard." Danny thought about this. "Thorn said I'm going to visit his planet someday. Do you think they have ice cream there?" Sophie laughed. "I doubt it, but maybe you can introduce them to it." "Good idea," Danny said excitedly. "And they can show me those giant lizards, and I can teach more dragons how to play catch." As they talked, a shadow passed overhead. They looked up to see Thorn flying above the colony. His massive wings spread wide in the evening light. The dragon circled once, then dipped one wing in what seemed like a salute before heading back to his ship. Danny waved enthusiastically. "See you tomorrow, Thorn." Sophie wasn't sure if the dragon could hear from that height, but she could have sworn she saw a flash of blue scales catching the sunset light. 1 week later, as the first permanent Draconian diplomatic team settled into their newly built embassy, Danny led a group of curious children to meet the visitors. The fear that had gripped the colony when the dragon ship first appeared was gone, replaced by cautious excitement about the future. "Remember," Danny told his friends as they approached the embassy, "they look scary, but they're just different, and they really like it when you ask about their scales." Governor Wilson, watching from a distance with Sophie, shook his head in wonder. "Your son has changed everything. The Draconian Alliance will transform our colony's future." Sophie smiled proudly. All because he wasn't afraid to pet a dragon. Inside the embassy, Thorn watched the approaching children through a large window. The colorful friendship bracelet still circled his wrist, a simple token that had helped bridge the gap between two very different worlds. Sometimes, the dragon mused to himself, the wisest approach is the simplest.